I'm here at the R2P Intern House, and we have 4 of our DPT students who will be answering some of what I would consider the most hot button topics in the PT world. Is that good?
Yeah. Like, what?
I'll do some softballs early on. Can we go with some softballs? What does post-graduation life look like for you?
I'll go ahead and get started. Ideally, I think I would want to use my skills as a clinician. I want to use all of them, so I don't want to specialize too soon. So ideally, I think somewhere like R2P is actually pretty good because you get to see athletes, but you also get to see a little bit of neuro, you get to see a little bit of geriatrics, so you get to see a little bit of pediatrics. So you get to see a little bit of everything. That's like my ideal working environment right out of graduation, just so I feel like I'm not specializing too early and losing essential skills that we learned.
This is not an advertisement.
I didn't intend it to be.
I just want to get into like an outpatient orthopedic clinic, just start getting experience treating patients and treating a wider variety of patients, and sort of specialize at a later point, probably pursue a residency at some point, but just treat a wide variety of patients and just get experience with that.
Here's what I'll say on that topic, and it is something that I was going to get to later. Cash pay PT and hour-long sessions is something that has been talked about a ton. Personally, I think there's a lot of value to being in a clinic that has a moderate amount of volume. I'm not going to say super high volume, 20 plus patients a day, 3 or 4 an hour. I'm going to say moderate volume. I think there is a benefit to checking processes. I think there's a benefit to coming up with certain levels of efficiency and effectiveness. With regards to also having variety of patient population base. So, and I say that also if you're not sure if you know what you want to do. And I think the exposure in itself ideally allows you to figure it out. So, especially for some people who maybe aren't in a situation where they feel comfortable saying, this is exactly what I want, I think that's the best approach. Again, moderate volume, okay? I'm not saying like 23, 24 patients a day. But putting yourself in a situation, again, you get that exposure, you're having to refine your processes because there is a little bit of a time crunch around what it is that you're doing. You don't just have all day. And then the residency piece we'll talk about a little bit later as well. What about you?
Kind of just talking about the residency piece. So for me, I knew that I wanted something that would set me up to spring me forward, right? Like I have big goals. I want to own my own clinic at some point, and I do believe that your first year is such a foundational period that I wanted to make sure that I had a strong foundation. And so I'll be joining the company, doing the ortho residency at Tyson's with R2P.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a ton about business over the course of the next year. That's pressure on me.
Yeah.
Seriously, you should take me up on that.
Oh, sweet, yeah.
Some PT students do a very good job of asking me for coffee.
Yeah.
And if you get me with a cup of coffee or 2 or 3,
Okay.
I will probably tell you a lot.
Got it.
All right.
I have your number, so I'll hold
Yes.
you to that.
I think for me personally, the first year is just getting more comfortable treating and getting comfortable with a schedule from like a 9-to-5 position or 410s, however, like how we do at R2P. But year 2 is probably going into a sports residency, trying to get a little more specialized. But that first year to me is just really understanding how I want to treat and building a caseload.
You bring up just adjusting after graduation to a 9-to-5, and we had a good conversation about burnout earlier, and I think one of the things that I did not bring up that is something that I think definitely needs mentioned is the challenge of moving from 6 or 7 years of college to regular life is a huge adjustment in itself. We have been looking at work-life balance and workplace happiness or workplace wellness over the past 5 years. And I can say that every single year, the worst numbers are in our new grads. And the best part about it is almost every single person will trend positively throughout their time with us. And I think overall, there's a lot of external factors. We can talk about inflationary pressures. We can talk about things involving student loan debt. We can talk about the fact that just I'm finally on my own potentially, right? I mean, I'm on my own, I've got a job, I've got rent, I'm looking to potentially have different milestones in my life from a family or life standpoint. I'm potentially moving somewhere that maybe is away from, where I grew up. There's a lot of lifing going on while we adjust to work. So I think that's something that also could potentially play into the burnout conversation as well, where we have external factors that are going on that are affecting our ability to be who we want to be at work. And sometimes it's combing through like what exactly is going on and what exactly are the pain points. And I think that's something that I've tried to be more conscious about is, again, like the check-ins with the younger clinicians, and seeing if we can also support them ways outside of the workplace environment. So with that being said, what are some things that you think are differentiating factors, and you can't name more than 3, I'm going to start with you, as to what you're looking for in the place that you'll be at after graduation?
I think mentorship is my number one for after graduation. I have lots of questions that I'd like to ask more experienced clinicians. I would say my number 2 would probably be patient population. I feel like at Rehab to Perform, you all do a great job of attracting what you all show. So getting the patients that want to get better through active exercise, and from that foundational standpoint. And then I guess 3 would be finding a location that I would want to live in. So I'm from Kentucky, but I don't necessarily say I want to stay in Kentucky, but just finding a place that I want to live would be number 3.
How close to Knoxville?
2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Okay, I got a bachelor party there coming up. So. That doesn't need to be included. What about you?
I would say number 1 is similar to mentoring, but I'll say education. So for me, something that, just being completely transparent, that I struggle with right now is being able to speak patient language to the patient versus the verbiage that we learned in school. So education, I feel like a company that values education to the patient, but then also education to the employee. So education, company culture, I feel like there's a push to love what you do. And I don't feel like you have to love what you do. I don't think that most people love what they do.
I don't love what I do every day.
Yeah. But you at least
today
have to like
I was
it.
in spreadsheets and numbers today, and that is probably my least favorite day. So, yes, that is very true.
I feel like you at least have to like it. And if you're in a company that the culture is good enough, the people are good enough, then it makes those bad days a little bit better. So education, company culture, and then if I had to choose one more, a place that I feel like there is room for growth, so that I can grow through the company. Sure.
You were going to be at the Tyson's location, and that is the Juice Crew. And they bring the juice every day. Am I wrong? How many juice box emojis are in Slack?
It's only coming
Tyson's
from
Crew?
Tyson.
Okay.
We all hopped on after
So,
that.
Yeah.
Yes. So, also recent winners of both of our January and February brand challenges. So I think you're going to be in a great spot.
Sweet.
You're going to have a lot of fun at least.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Katie kind of hit it on both of the ones that were big ones for me, but mentorship, I feel like we come out of school as entry-level practitioners, but there's still so much room to grow, and we come out of school knowing a little bit about every aspect of PT, but then we want to specialize and start to learn how to treat in whatever population we're interested in. So having the opportunity to just learn more about treating in that setting and with that population. And then the big one is also just opportunity for growth, and just whether that's a residency offered through the company or just whatever opportunities there are for growth, and just in the future opportunity to just keep going upward, not staying in the same spot.
I think that's super important. I think that one of the things that I would make sure that all 4 of you know is it is good to have structured mentorship. It is also good to get good at asking for time. And when you do get time, then being very, very prepared with high-level questions. So look like you've done a little bit of the work yourself. Look like you've sourced some of your own problems with your own solutions a little bit. People like to be a little bit higher level. So look like you've put some effort into whatever might be challenging you at that given time. I think you'll find yourself in a better situation. The people that have grown the quickest at our company have taken advantage of the resources that have been provided to them, but then also have gone above and beyond with regards to asking people for time, potentially meeting people off hours. One of the things that I know some of the people like to do is, they might be going into work, and they might say, hey, call me while I'm driving into work. So meeting people wherever they're at. Mentorship is going to look different when you talk about those informal touch points for everybody. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out when and what that looks like with whoever it is that you're trying to potentially be mentored by.
Alright, that leaves me. I want to be somewhere that focuses on evidence-based practice. It was something our school really harped on, and I really loved it. They really taught us how to read a research article, which I think a lot of clinicians lack the ability to read it, analyze it, and interpret it, and create their own understanding of it and how they're going to implement it. So I think being in that environment will allow me to keep those skills and encourage me to do my own research working with patients. I also want to work somewhere where the clinicians prioritize their own wellness. So how are they taking care of themselves? They're not running themselves into the ground. Like, how are they filling their cup back up? Just because I feel like I thrive in those environments where if I see it, I will also do it. So if I see someone taking care of themselves, it almost motivates me more to take care of myself more. And then the last is, I had it and I forgot about it. Being in an environment where everyone brings something different to the table. So I want somewhere where I can pick someone's brain about something, like maybe someone's a neuro, maybe someone's a cardiac, maybe someone's a power lifter, maybe someone plays a sport, can kind of get their knowledge and get their experience. We're not all thinking the same. We should all be thinking differently.
Contrast, right? Diversity of thought. I think that's something that is underrated. Definitely not spoken about a lot. I think that if I'm being transparent, we will have conversations about different personality types and personality styles at a location. We have a kind of like a bartender designation for certain personality types. And I won't tell you on camera who's the bartender at which offices, but you need a bartender type at a certain office. You need other types in terms of how people operate, how they think, how they handle certain things, their ability to kind of flow and fluctuate with the people in the room. So I do think that's incredibly important. And then when it comes to problem solving, I don't think there's much argument to why more potential ideas would be a benefit. I think sometimes the challenge is then having people that understand that contrast is a very, very big benefit, diversity of thought is a benefit, and then also being able to move forward with one voice. So recognizing that sometimes, and that goes for myself, I might be on an island by myself, right, with certain things, and sometimes you have to realize that, and then sometimes you got to kind of find a way to come back to the group. But as it relates to the mentorship piece, and I forgot to mention this, if each of you were to go, I'll remind you later, but rehabyourperform.com/mentorship. We have our first 15 months mapped. So you should be able to look at that. That is something that will go into R2P Connect. And even if you don't end up with us, it might be a good talking point to the next place you're at. And you could kind of say, hey, this is what I would like my mentorship to potentially include. Or if somebody asks you the question, what would you like your mentorship to look like? I would argue it might be a good talking point, and it's something, again, we'll be more and more transparent about what it looks like, because I think transparency is beneficial for everybody. There's no negative to sharing it. It's not secret sauce at the end of the day. It's just us committing to doing things a certain way. As it relates to residency has transformed a ton over the past decade. It used to be one of those things where you would be a resident and it would be entirely unpaid, and now it is to a point in time where some residencies even work up to a point where you're fully compensated. You'll be starting in a prorated role. As you start to pick up more hours throughout the course of your residency, you could potentially be a fully paid resident. Now, some people will say, I don't need residency to build out an area of specialty, right? We have some people that went and did the OCS this week that did not do an orthopedic residency. No, this is not necessarily for everybody, but talk a little bit about residency, your thoughts on residency, and some considerations that you made to kind of, guide how you feel about it at this stage of the game.
I think it depends on why you're going into the residency. I think you have to think about, what am I looking for on the other end of this? Because maybe if you're looking for a pay increase, might not be getting that pay increase, just depending on which company you work for.
Pay increase and fully reimbursed, okay? Take the test, you pay for all of the test taking, we pay you on the back end. And if you are less than 5 years, you get an automatic push to senior physical therapist. Just saying. As you were.
Continuing on. I think it is a great opportunity for clinicians who are maybe not as confident in certain areas, like orthopedics. There you can go into the rabbit hole of how deep you want to go, and I think PT school only scratches the surface. So if you need that guidance of, I need someone or something telling me what to do, what to focus on, then I think it could be great because it provides that structure. Whereas I think you would also be perfectly fine if you read the literature, you understand the literature, you know how to seek out your own sources. I think you might also be fine doing that, because at the end of the day, I don't think patients care about the titles at the end of your name. It might make you feel better as a clinician, but I think if you could communicate properly to your patients, they're not going to be like, well, this person doesn't have their OCS. So I think that it's just, you have to consider all those factors.
Yeah, I think the only time we ran into issues with titles, we tried to do a PTA at one point, and I think we just had too many people aware that they were with the assistant. So that was the only time we really ran into issues with that. I think that I like your use of the word source. I do think that some people recognize they thrive with structure. I think some people are more, there's more friction associated with structure. I might actually be one of those people. I like kind of coming up with my own structure. But I think that somebody could be looking to accelerate their knowledge, accelerate their, as I mentioned the word earlier, kind of ignorance tax as it relates to going through your reps and how quickly can I deliver quality care as much as possible. Bias, but our residents also will have access to other things in our company ecosystem as it relates to mentorship and onboarding, other asynchronous resources, other in-services, other time, other con ed. I do a little biased, but I think that might be a little bit more unique. There are certain things, Sydney went to a residency at UDEL. She had a very enriching experience with regards to touch points outside of the clinic, outside of just what she was doing with Delaware with regards to the educational side of things. So I think some of it also is like a little bit more of a case-by-case basis as to what the residency is actually providing you, and making sure that people are doing their due diligence. And I think in situations where I think people have been less than thrilled with what went on at the residency experience, it is largely related to the fact that they either didn't ask questions on the front end or potentially had some kind of misguided expectation as to maybe what it would mean for them, knowing that they maybe hadn't reached out to the organization that they were going to, or hadn't potentially put out enough feelers to say, hey, if I do X, how is this going to benefit me in the environment that I'm going to go in? Certain situations like sports, it might actually be a difference maker as it relates to having that designation, because you also can be on field. So there's certain situations where I have seen it be a benefit. If you get board certified in sports, you could potentially put yourself in a situation where like a pro sports job might also be a little bit more of a reachable target for you. So again, ask questions, do your due diligence, make sure you're putting yourself in a situation where you're walking into a situation with your eyes wide open. What about you?
Sort of similar to what you were just talking about. I think it's all about what you want to get out of the residency, of doing that research to see if it's more of a clinical focused residency and working on building up those clinical skills out of school, or if it's more research based. both have benefits, but it's also just similar with everything in life. What you put into it, you get out of it. So if you put that time into it and you want to build up those clinical skills and learn how to treat a specific patient population better and get better patient outcomes for those people you're treating, then I think it's worth it if you put in the time and the effort.
Yeah, I think the ability to get better faster. I probably would have done a residency back in the day if it wasn't paying me $0. So I think if it was the current landscape today where I can actually have a full salary, I was like one of those Con Ed junkies where in my first job, I got some mentorship, but then I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to as many courses as possible. And I might have been in a situation where I did not need to do that. So I look at like the amount of money that I spent and also not being in a situation where I was having anything with regards to structure. It probably took me a little bit longer to kind of put all the pieces together. So you're biased.
Yeah, definitely biased. I feel like I went into the idea of residency biased. When I think of the PTs that are who I want to be like, all of them were either residency trained or fellowship trained. And so if I'm just looking at my role models in the field that I want to be in, their commonality is that they either did a residency or a fellowship, because I think fellowship came first and then they started doing residencies. Because I was talking to one of my professors and she was saying that she didn't have the opportunity to do a residency because they didn't exist at that point, but she did a fellowship, and she attributes that to like the PT that she is today. But then also I am kind of going back to what I said earlier. I'm a youngest child, right? And so I thrive off of the structure, the foundation, and then once I get that, I do what I'm able to kind of like do what I want, do as I please, mold things into what I want to do, what I want things to look like after that. But being a youngest, I've always had that foundation. And so I think it kind of ties into just my personality and also just how life has been to this point. For me, PT school is the first thing that I didn't do that my older sister, the first thing that I did that my older sister didn't previously do. And so I've like always had that example. And then PT school was significantly harder because I couldn't call my sister up and be like, hey, how did you get through this, right? And so for me, choosing to do the residency route, it allows me to get better faster, but then also research supports that a residency trained PT gets their patients better faster. So it's like, I want to be, not saying that that's the route that you have to take, right? You said that depending on the person, you can do your own research and like kind of be self-driven to be that PT. But I also want to just set myself up to be that PT. And for me, what it looked like was choosing a residency.
And you're in great hands with Dr. Tim. I think one of the things that I think about when I think about residency too, at least from an orthopedic standpoint, is we do some physician marketing. It's not a ton of physician marketing. We value our relationships, but we do largely go to a lot of different places with regards to direct access marketing. But board certified in orthopedics or board certified in sports is something that will resonate with the physician population as well. So I think when we continue to try to gain legitimacy from a healthcare ecosystem standpoint and largely a physician-driven world, that regardless of whether or not you're residency trained or not, and you go and achieve these board certifications, I do think that it is something that is going to be beneficial. It is beneficial now, and ideally it continues to be more and more beneficial as that becomes more and more of a track. There's a lot of people out there that are also proposing changes to school. Potentially you run into a situation where you have 2 years of school and your final year is a residency no matter what, and it's part of your curriculum or part of what is expected. I think that might be pretty cool, and even if you didn't know what a specialty you wanted to jump in, maybe it's a primary care designation. So I think it's just interesting to kind of also, in addition to think about what it's going to do for you right now, also think about the legitimacy it's going to bring you from a private practice standpoint when you potentially open up your own place, and what it might mean in terms of the greater healthcare ecosystem as well.
I think my thoughts on residencies follows the same thing as any coursework, and it's like it's not what you learn, it's about what you do with the knowledge that you gain. So for me, I would do a sports residency because I want to fast track working with athletes, and I would like to eventually work on a sports team if that's feasible. It's a certain point in time, but I don't think you should be doing a residency just because you want the credentials or you just want to learn something new. I think you should be doing it for a specific reason.
Intent, yes. I would largely say that anything done in life without intent is potentially a waste of time, or at least admitting that it's just leisure. I don't know that something that's that great of a time commitment should be something that's leisure. So, first, hot button topic. And we're going to start with you.
You mean those weren't already hot button?
What would you change or add at Rehab to Perform?
What would I change or add to Rehab to Perform?
Just cut straight into it.
Anyone first?
Straight
I'm
into
curious
it.
to see.
Sourcing for ideas here.
I love
Let's go.
I would honestly say that the time gap between the lunch is kind of weird. So if you take the 30-minute slot and then you have the lunch, sometimes if that's a more complicated patient, it drags into your lunch to where you might have like 5 minutes for lunch before the next one walks in.
Fair. In the state of Maryland, just so I am being transparent here, this has been a topic for a while. Right now, it is within their 40 hours. So we have lunch within. Now, in the state of Maryland, it is not mandatory, and you have different state-by-state laws as it relates to lunch. So I'm always a big believer. It's like a fine line between like finding optimal or like going too much one end of the spectrum. It's not that much different than patient care. We could see 3 people an hour. We're legally allowed to in the state of Maryland, and we see 2. So we find a happy medium. Lunch-wise, is there always potentially, is more going to be potentially better sometimes? Yes. Is it going to be better all the times? No. It's twofold. One, if I kept it at 40 hours and then nobody reached their bonus metrics because I potentially had 5 hours blocked in a 40-hour week, then I would have people potentially complaining because they're not receiving bonuses or additional compensation as a result of repetitively hitting bonuses. So there are certain considerations there that I always kind of go, all right, what is the bell curve? And I'm trying to continually find what the bell curve is. So in situations like that, maybe having a little bit more conversations with the front desk and making sure that the next time that person might be scheduled, hey, if you mind, please don't put them up against my lunch, or if anything, move my lunch. So that might be a little bit more on the practitioner to have those kinds of conversations. Again, trying to find that happy medium. There are other factors going on. At the end of the day, it is a business. People do want to make more money. I'm trying to find a bell curve as it relates to a lot of different circumstances, and at the end of the day, like I have to sit back and kind of go, when does more become less? And that might be one of those situations where if I did an hour, I do worry that if I had more, it might become less, and there might be other talking points that come as a result. Not saying it's a right or wrong answer, it's just in my head I feel like it's beneficial to at least just be transparent about kind of why that is what it is.
Josh, I have a hot button topic for you based off what
Let's
you
go.
just said.
Let's go.
Do you think it might be a slippery slope attaching monetary gains to productivity? So saying I will pay you more if you see more patients.
I think at the end of the day, work deserves compensation, and that we work in a capitalistic society, and that people do things to receive a return on what it is that they're doing from a value standpoint. So I say, hi, my name is Josh, this is Rehab to Perform, you are working here, I need you to do X, and if you do X, I will provide you with Y. If you do X plus 1, I will give you Y plus 1. So I'd like to be in a situation where if people are doing more, that I also am not of the mindset where, oh, well, congratulations, you're doing more than that person and you are getting the same thing. I like to reward things. I like to reward people. I mentioned some of the individuals who have worked to a point or are working to a point where they are earning the right to have non-clinical roles in the company. Some of what they did was own their patient caseload very, very early on. They showed the propensity to develop themselves to be effective and efficient caregivers. They were able to navigate a busier caseload. They brought me and the company value, and they contributed to us being able to grow as a result of their efforts. So it would be foolish of me not to meet that with reciprocity. So I think there's always a happy medium in any of those situations. Getting back to his conversation earlier, more is not always more. It's more to a point where you and I feel like this is mutually beneficial for both of us, and at some point in time, if that seesaws one way or the other, then we need to have a conversation about it. Thoughts?
I agree. I do agree that we should be, what's the word I'm looking for? We should be rewarded for things that we do.
Right.
I do think maybe there's something to be said about if we put on too much of a caseload, put too much on our PTs, that patient outcomes might not be as good, just because we're not looking at patient outcomes, we're looking at how many people we see. So that's where like my head kind of goes, but I see both sides of it.
When you get a chance, look up the average visits per day in an orthopedic or an outpatient PT place. When you get a chance.
Average visits of an outpatient.
Average visits per day.
Okay.
We are 0.1 below in terms of our target.
Okay.
So I don't feel like in our environment we are seeing too much. However, if people want to go above the average, we have a flat rate bonus now, and we have a percentage of your salary bonus. So if you choose to do these things, great. But our target is 80% of your schedule being full. It's not 100%, it's 80%. If you go back to Google's old like 80-20 work rule, you got 80% devoted towards the thing, 20% towards ancillary, miscellaneous, developing a better ability to do the thing. So I will also say, because productivity is often mentioned in isolation, that KPIs are done in a quadrant at rehab to perform. So you have productivity as it relates to visits here. That is the volume, that is the number of people that you see. You have billing units. I do not want to underbill for services. I do not want to overbill for services. There is a happy medium in all of this. But I should adequately bill for the service because I'm providing a value, and I have a payer that needs to reciprocate with the value of the session that I'm given with compensation. I have churn rate over here, which largely is if people are discontinuing or it turns into an incomplete discharge. So a churn rate is an industry agnostic metric. If people are churning off your schedule and they're regularly just discharging and you keep having to quick discharge or incomplete discharge them and they never get to a mutually agreed upon plan of care exit, aka graduation board, t-shirt, Google review in our environment, that's probably not a good thing. Your visits per IE will be significantly less. In that situation, you can't say you're delivering optimal outcomes because you're churning every patient out because there's a lack of alignment there. And then your final bucket is NPS, which is the biggest marker, and it's a gold standard. Again, it's industry agnostic, and it's a benchmark of customer service, brand loyalty, and likely to refer people word of mouth. So if I can talk about the quadrant of KPIs and make sure, again, that I'm shooting for Goldilocks in each of these areas, but also providing people with information as it relates to what's a high performer in each of these 4 areas, I feel very comfortable saying, here is our cut point, and if you're here, I will happily provide extra for you because you're going above what that is. I'm not allowing less because we have to have certain standards and expectations, and I also recognize that more is not more. But it's a matter of, again, figuring out what the bell curve is, figuring out what optimal is, and then for my high achievers and high performers, rewarding them. Ready?
Yep. So I would think I would add in like rehab text or exercise text, more just for the purpose of when you have those patients that at the end of a half hour finishing off with an exercise circuit or whatever, just to give a little extra set of eyes and to help guide, and if they need corrections, just to have that extra set of eyes, because you're sort of starting to shift the focus onto that next patient that's coming in, and just that extra set of eyes to guide the patient through and correct if they needed it.
I'm not opposed to it. I think the challenge that has always been communicated, at least from a team standpoint, is how long are they with us? What's the barrier from a training standpoint? And are we going to babysit more than we are actually deliver a high-level service? And I ask that knowing that sometimes you run into issues with largely the age demographic that serves tech roles, which is high school, college students, or people that are between college and DPT school, not typically professionals. I also know that you're running into a situation where you also might run into more challenges having somebody that from a compensation standpoint is also making less than the front desk. So is it a friction-filled, high-value role in the company, or can I find other ways to simplify what capacity building, which largely is what I would view the time period where I'm not conversation and competency with them, which I would largely view as one-on-one time. It's conversation, it's competency, it's making sure that they feel like they're being heard, making sure that we're working with new things, teaching new things, providing a bookend on the session, redirecting what they're doing at home, putting them in a situation where they're aware I'm forecasting for future sessions, and then I'm doing an EMOM, I'm doing a tri-set, I'm doing reconditioning. Hate to say it, but if I gave them something that needs cueing during that point in time, I screwed up. I should be giving them things that they've owned. I should be giving them low barrier to entry exercises that I'm trying to put them in a situation to accumulate volume in a safe fashion, to build resilience, to get sweat, to cultivate the self-optimism in our sixth principle. And at the end of the day, I know safely that they're building a new baseline and they're walking out with a certain level of fulfillment. So I'd argue that if they need correction and they need a high school or college-age person that's high friction, that potentially is with me for a very, very short period of time, is regularly churning out at 9 or 10 offices, that largely is providing the environment and the clinicians with pain points as opposed to value adds, I look at that and kind of go, do we need it? So again, not saying it's right, just being transparent about conversations we've had and the thought process there. Thoughts?
The only extra benefit I could see from having the rehab tech there, just supervising during those periods, is if during that first half hour when you're working with them and you did a lot of new things and pushed manual therapy harder this session and added in some new progressions, just making sure during those last 3 exercises that things didn't start to feel worse or that things didn't feel different than they did in the previous times. Like there's still exercises they've done before, but just making sure they don't feel different or there's not like a adverse effect or unexpected effects during those last couple exercises.
Is that more of an issue with dosing, or is that more of an issue with my ability to have conversation with them about how the last session went? Is it my lack of education as it relates to RPE or reps in reserve? Have I given them enough self-governance to modify and change things? Have I also given them the permission to come over and interrupt me? I don't know. But I would also argue that I could be facilitating more independence than not by not just having an individual sit next to you and go, how was your lunges? It's great. How was your sled? Oh, you looked fine. I looked great. Okay, sounds good. Where I sat there, and maybe it's also from my experience in rehab, where I looked over at this person that was younger than me. I went, can you go away? Like, I'm good. I know what I'm doing. Please leave me alone. So I say this transparently as well. I think we have enough people in the room. I think we have enough DPT students where we have more bodies. We have more college students. We have high school students. So do I need to sit there with, again, somebody that's going to be there for a short amount of time? Is it high value? It's largely capacity building. I don't know. When my KPIs suggest that we need to do something different with the service delivery side as it relates to having techs, I will change. But for right now, that's not going to happen in the foreseeable future. So just being honest.
I already know you're not gonna like my answer, but
wait for the one that's like a glaring problem, and I know that it's a problem, and I just haven't been able to figure it out yet.
Okay. So question for you. Would you rather it be something that has repeatedly come up as a patient complaint, or would you rather it be something that, like, for me, I feel like would be nice?
Either
I
or.
know where this is
Okay.
going.
Either or. There is one thing that I know that I've got to find a way to make it more transparent, at least.
Okay.
And I think that would also have more accountability on our PTs with regards to what's being communicated more towards later stages. But that's a
Okay.
whole separate, yeah.
I don't think this is that.
Yeah.
Very simple fix. The patient complained about it and they
Fine.
said this is how you can fix it.
Yeah.
But the overhead lights.
Ah,
Every single time
They're
I
blind me.
have a patient come in that I'm going to do manual on, or they just need to lie flat on the table, they're always complaining about how bright the overhead lights are. And we had
you're not wrong.
yeah.
You're not wrong.
And we had a
And I have this problem at several locations, and you know what the challenging part is? When you're a leasee and you're leasing a space, I can change some things, but I can't change everything. So I'm just sometimes in a rock and a hard place, and I can go back with a suggestion, and I can see if it gets allowed.
Okay. This patient said that what she should do. She literally was like, the next time you see Josh, you should say this.
A dimmer switch
Yeah.
across the entire place so that I dimmer switch every light in the entire 5,000 square foot facility.
Yeah.
Here we
Nice,
go.
honestly.
She said
No,
that.
you know what I need is I need some way to have a conversation and not have to have building standard lights over
Yeah.
top of the treatment tables. I don't think it's overly challenging. You know, sometimes building landlords are like imperfect people, you know what I mean? Sometimes they also make it cost prohibitive. You look at it and you go, might be challenging. Well, guess
Yeah.
what? Maybe I just need to put a towel over somebody's eyes or something. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It's not the only office that I have that issue with. Hate to say it, Tyson's screwed up the lights. The lights over the treatment table were supposed to be everywhere else, and the lights everywhere else were supposed to be over the treatment table. So you'll walk in there and you'll go, huh, why are the lights slightly dimmer over here and brighter over the treatment tables? Okay, but then when I go have the talk with the landlord and I show them an email thread of what went back and forth, and they're like, no, we had a conversation about it. I'm like, no, we didn't. I had the same conversation over in Bethesda where I needed dimmer lights over top in Bethesda, and we did that. Like, that was what I was looking for. You came and walked the space.
Yeah.
So there are some things that every day I have to, and I mentioned this earlier, not every day, but sometimes I have to eat shit, and you
Yeah.
just kind of have to say, here's the circumstances, this is what it is,
Yeah.
and I wish it could be better. Here's a temporary solution, here might be a long-term solution, and that might be as much as
Yeah.
I can do. I don't own the building, so that is the thing that I always have to say. There are some things that I can change. I've got 2 things going on right now at offices that I can't change, or I can change and I can just complain. In Gambrels and Leesburg, they're building out the space next door, and I've got unbelievable noise, and all I can do is complain. And then guess what?
Yeah.
Here's a Band-Aid for 3 hours, and then what happens again? Kelly and Grant reaching out. Josh, the noise is horrible again. There's dust coming over from next door. I got Drew at Gambrels. What happened? How many times
They
the
came
past
through
3
the
weeks?
wall.
I gotta get in phone with Ashton and say, Ashton, I'm trying to run a business here, okay? Your people are literally creating enough dust that stuff is falling off of the walls onto the floor. So sometimes I do my best, and despite my best efforts,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work out. So I'm gonna have to eat that one, and at some point, I do think that probably is solvable. Some of it's probably gonna rely on me just saying, all right, what's the cost? And just handling it myself. But there are certain things that go on as it relates to budgeting and cost and stuff like that where, I might not wanna rush to pay 10 to 15 grand on switching out lights or light fixtures, or I think some people have said there's some dead spots over there, so then I would add more lights. So it's just lights are not as cheap as you think, and then electrical stuff to them. So it's a thing. So,
Yeah.
but I'm with you.
Mhm.
I think you're right. Okay, and it's not the only office that
Yeah.
unfortunately happens. So my biggest pain point, I love the whiteboards. I wish I had digital whiteboards in every office. I wish that I had a flat screen at every office, and I wish that I had a little pen. And in addition to writing stuff that I could easily email home, I could pull YouTube videos, I could do quick browser searches and like send those home with people. I just wish I had a more versatile little board at every table, or at least potentially one board in every office that I could set up in a way that was better for home programs. Because I think, although the home programs seem very simple, I think they're largely effective. And at least for me, I think that you have largely people that do them. I've interacted with a lot of the different tech things. I don't think our team needs more tech. I don't think they need to go into like a more of an HEP and an online platform to get another person doing another app and another thing on their phone. Like, I think the simplicity of the whiteboard would be really, really nice. And I think if I could find a better way to display it and have a little bit more versatility with regards to utilizing our YouTube channel and utilizing the World Wide Web, that it would really, it would be my, at least, version of what I think would be a really, really good home prescription pad. And that's almost what I would call it. And that's why we kind of have the RX thing up on the magnets at most of the offices now, above the small whiteboards. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but that is something that I like think about all the time.
Would the boards be interactive enough to put vestibular rehab stuff up on the screen?
God, it would just be versatile. Yes. Hanging out with Chris too much, probably.
I feel like the best idea I can think of is like on the iPads you can download like notability apps and just like do a blank page and just like draw on it with an Apple Pencil.
Yeah, but I need the difference
But,
between iPad, and the only other things I've seen are like 80-inch TVs that I'm not going to put a
Massive.
huge flat screen thing. Like, I need a 2x3 foot screen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I need just something more compact, and I need to be able to customize the software in the hardware
Into it.
the way that I think would be best. And maybe this is an idea, and we end up. Who
Need a
knows?
software engineer.
I mean, who knows?
I'll let my dad know.
I never thought we'd have 84 people. I mean, in a couple of years, who knows how many people we'll have, and then you'd maybe be able to get to pitch your own idea. Maybe it ends up being something that has application more places than just our place. You just never know. But that is one thing that I think of all the time that I think would be a better source of education. I think it would be a better product, just if I'm talking about the take home of what the individual is displaying. And I think it would help out just with overall just like alignment and the outcomes that we're looking for. So again, like, I know the pen on the whiteboard is like very simple, but I think that largely people are feeling like they're getting an individualized experience. They feel like it's very catered to them. They're not getting a cookie cutter sheet. But I think the product itself is like a C+ product. It's a pen, it's a whiteboard, and there's nothing more to it. I think the integration of tech and being able to have a little bit more applications in terms of what we're giving somebody for home would potentially be very valuable. 3 to 5 exercises, potentially something for YouTube to better educate them on what is going on with them, potentially like some kind of research article that gets bolted in. And yeah, maybe you give people more information that they potentially need, but the take-home product just takes like several levels higher. So maybe it'll happen sometime, maybe it won't. I don't know.
In my head, it doesn't necessarily answer the whiteboard problem, but for the take-home part, I guess I don't fully know what R2 Plus is, but I feel like if what I think R2 Plus is, if there were a component to where their HEP is built into that, and then once they discharge, in my head, R2P is like after discharge, it's like when you
Absolutely.
want to continue.
Yes.
And so it would kind of get people, is it an app?
Yeah,
Okay.
Coach Callis, it's an app. It's got
Okay.
it's got nutrition stuff and fitness stuff in there.
It would get people into the app prior to discharge, right? So they're used to using it, but as soon as they come in, you somehow within the app you have like the HEP component. That way you've already done the videos probably for the R2 Plus component and just move those videos over. So in my head, just building in a HEP component to R2 Plus.
I like it. I'm going to go two directions with it. One, I think we'd have to standardize when we integrated Coach Catalyst into the plan of care. And I don't know if it might just be on discharge day. We
Okay.
give them their final home program in the app. They would get a automatic invite to the app. And I only say that, and this is just reality. I've got PTs who have a hard enough job keeping track of Slack and keeping track of what's going on in the EMR. So I don't necessarily think the integration of a third app with regularity is something that would necessarily be met without some friction. So if I could standardize it towards just the discharge plan of care potentially, and maybe have a little bit more of templated home programs for certain population types or certain measures and metrics maybe that they're still working towards, maybe that would be positive, and that might be an easier entry point. As it relates to people doing different things as they're going through school, I think what each of them did do is they did things that were intentional about brand development. Knowing that personal brand gives you more inherent value. It does a better job at what I think is the most important thing, people knowing who you are, what you do, and how you solve people's problems. Or the value that you bring, who you are, what you do, and the value of what it is that you do. So whether or not it's in person, in the community, or online, what are you doing to carve out your brand? What are you thinking about when it comes to brand? Or are you at a stage right now where you kind of have more questions than answers?
I think I've thought about it, and I think I've seen a lot of, and this is mostly coming from Instagram, where I see a lot of PTs branch out and create an image for themselves versus attaching themselves to a company. And I've thought about it. I think it's really challenging, and I think it's something that you're not taught in school. But I think if you could just end up in the 9-to-5 PT realm, and I think it would be totally fine as long as you're happy there. But I think if you want to create something more for yourself, I think social media might be the way to go, because I think that's where you'll probably reach your largest audience and where you'll get the word of mouth of like, this is who I am, this is what I bring, these are the services I provide, kind of thing. So I think that's like where my head goes, of going down the Instagram route, just putting stuff out there, doing it for free, not expecting anything in return. And then I think that will come back to you. If I put this out for free, if I put all this knowledge, all this information for free, I think that will come back to me in terms of a monetary value.
I agree. Value out. The more you value out, the more you figure out if what you put out actually has value. If you put value out in the world and you don't receive much in return, or people don't continue to seek you out, then you kind of figure out quickly that you need to find more ways to deliver value. So sometimes I think the best way of figuring out if what you're doing is the right way, or if you have enough value, is to be transparent. So the more that you are sharing things, the more you're doing things, the more you're communicating things, like you said, the quicker you figure out whether or not what it is, the thing that you do, has value, and whether or not somebody actually would be willing to potentially pay for more of it. So I'm with that. Thoughts?
I'm definitely more in like the still figuring it out phase at this point, but definitely I think content creation and social media is a big outlet, and might be weaning away from the question that you asked originally, but I think personally I believe that as healthcare professionals, like, we should live the lifestyle that we preach in terms of like fitness, diet, not unhealthy diet, but just healthy lifestyle. And I think that is a good place to start off with content creation, and just acknowledging that we don't just tell people to do this lifestyle and tell people this is what you should do to get better and to encourage rehab, and that we actually practice what we preach.
I agree. If you're on Twitter, there was an absolute doozy of a thread centered around that very same topic over the past 2 days. So very, very contrasting opinions on the subject. I think that a lot of them, I think if you get into the nuance of it, they probably agree more than they don't agree. But I think there's some, perceptions as it relates to health being something, can I always see health? I think there's probably a certain amount of health that I can see. There's certain levels of obesity that are probably a little bit more apparent. But I think at the end of the day, the more that we do share, the more that people do get to tap into our lifestyles. So the more that, more transparent we are about how we live, the more people can probably objectively look at it and go, that's a healthy habit or not a healthy habit. So
I think just the opportunity to just lead by example and just show that this is a lifestyle that can be a healthy outcome and lead to a healthy lifestyle, and just showing that to our patients.
Absolutely, I agree.
I would say I'm probably dead in the middle of like figuring out my personal brand, but then also having more questions than answers. I do a really good job at starting things, right? And then things pick up and I'm like, man, I don't really know where to go from here. So for me, I have a journalism background, and so something that the pandemic was really hard for me, right? It was just like such a transitional period. I was transitioning from like a bunch of different things. Coming out of that, I was like, okay, having different conversations, I realized that like that transition is something that everybody goes through, just like the 20s are just a transitional thing. And so I tried to start a podcast, right? And talk about just like building that brand of like, I don't know, sorry, my brain is shutting down.
No, but the podcast builds your brand and it connects you with other people that might be similar.
I think for me, my start of like trying to build my brand is figuring out what my personal brand is. So checking into that self-awareness and then going from there, okay, what does that look like in different spaces?
I feel a day in the life of an orthopedic resident coming soon. Right, Kev? Let's meet you guys next year. Let's go.
Well, we've been talking.
Start planning. We got 4 months, 5 months. You're bringing us home for the night.
I think a brand, like a personal brand, is how you carry yourself initially. So it starts with the foundation of yourself and what your values are, what you think would make a good brand. But I also think building a brand is exactly what it sounds like. I don't think a brand is just made out of thin air. You have to build it over time. Everything takes experience. You're not going to be good at something the first time you try it. Coming out of physical therapy school, I'm not expecting to be amazing my first day, but it's going to be built over time. And creating a brand that I believe in and a way of treatment that I believe in is going to be important moving forward.
No, definitely. And underlying the treatment too is just like you as a person, right?
Yeah.
Like you just showcasing yourself. And I have to remind myself of this all the time, and we've probably had endless conversations about this, but like we take for granted the things that we do well or are unique about us on a regular basis. And like in all reality, sometimes it's good just to put it out in the world. And I'm still guilty of it myself, where I'll go through a full day and be like, man, I had some gems today and I did absolutely nothing with it. But sometimes it's also challenging to determine like how much or when or like what environment. I think sometimes I live in the world of perfectionism as it relates to social media. It's probably my biggest barrier as I try to unpack it. But yeah, definitely realize like the importance of it. I think one thing that people don't talk about enough too with brand, and I'll kind of end this on this note, but like brand in person in your community, I think is going to make and it is making a tremendous comeback. I think the online space is great, but I do think that people that own the world that they live in and they're interacting and they're owning the old school, just shake hands, smile, get to know people, be genuinely interested in them, pour into them in person. I think that's going to be something that definitely is going to have tremendous value, because I think we saw this like tremendous shift into the social space and online opportunities and stuff. And I think if you can have kind of a mix of both, like you make yourself really, really like valuable and just like robust moving forward. Like nobody can take that away from you. Like when you go to the restaurant or something like that and somebody like recognizes you, like that's That's it's like an amazing feeling. Like, and ideally, like, if you live in a community for a long period of time, and I feel very fortunate, like, to be able to do this, and we have other PTs that can say this too. Is like, you go out in public and people recognize you, like, pretty regularly, like, if you've been somewhere for a while and you have that, like, that social capital. That makes you feel good too. Over the course of the years, all your hard work and all the things you've done outside of the clinic. And that's like a proponent of, or not a proponent. That's a component of conscious capitalism. You are being transformational outside of the clinic. You're being connected outside of the clinic. You're not just transactional inside the clinic. So I would challenge you all to check that out. Other than that, thank you all. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I always say, as a token of my appreciation, if you have one of the online courses or in-person courses that you would potentially like to take, you can let me know which one you want beyond just Foundations of Sports Rehab. I'd be happily to gift that to you. So just message me. I have your emails already, so that would be very, very easy. And then if you want at least, kind of like an hour of my time, it could be on the phone. I know some of you all leave pretty soon. We might struggle to always sync up in person, but happy to give time too. So that's not something that's like with this, but I would say it's even more meaningful, and I feel probably more indebted to you. You all gave me time, I'll give you time. So it could be now, it could be in a couple of years when you go start your business, whatever. So thank you all.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.